Hello guys, how you doing? This is going to be a video response to a video recently posted by the Albino Rhino. If you're not familiar with the Albino Rhino, you should check him out. I'm going to have a link down here. It's going to be a video response to that video. Um, One of the best beer tubers on YouTube with his whole gang, and for my money, the most entertaining show on YouTube. So if you're not familiar with him, check him the fuck out. Come to your senses and do it. He posed the question: what were the 10 most influential beers on your drinking life, essentially? This is a much better question than what are your top 10 favorite beers of all time, because that's sort of a bullshit question, because that's one of those ones that's very subjective, that can change all the time. It's very much dependent on what you can actually get in your specific area or whatever. And it's just not a very it's not a very good question, because it's one that can always change. Like, it's changed for me several times in my life. Like, I've answered the question before, but it was very much a slave to what I could currently get. And it's a hard question to answer. But this is a much better question. It's much levels the playing field a bit more. It's what are the most influential beers on your drinking life, however it is. So, not necessarily the best beers you've ever had in your life, just the beers that have been a game changer for you, that have set you off somewhere else, some other direction in your drinking experience, good or bad, really. So I actually managed to do a top 10. He said you could do like a top 5 if you couldn't think of 10. It must have been even harder for him to do 10, because he's had way more beers than I've had. And I found it hard to do a 10. It took me a while to put this list together, but I have it here. So we're going to do it. Starting with number 10, Keith IPA. Now, laugh at me all you will. Like I said before, this is not a best beers list. This is a list of the most influential beers. This was the first beer I ever had. This was a beer my dad used to give me a little bit of as early on as 4 years old. Now, don't get the wrong impression. I've been drinking since I was 4. I have not. But he used to give me, for a little while there, he used to give me a few sips here and there. Gave me, like a half a cup from a thermos, top of a thermos or whatever, right? Never believed in that forbidden fruit bullshit. So, Alexander Keith's was my macro of choice for the longest time. Back when I was only drinking macros, thumb my nose at Molson, thumb my nose at fucking Labatt. This was the macro that had actual flavor, actual taste. Years later, I sort of look at that in shame almost, because definitely not very good flavors or taste or anything like that. Although I will say Alexander Keith's was a lot better back in the day when I had it, and it's not just nostalgia. Talking, it has really turned to shit in the last 10 years or so, but yeah, so that's number 10, Alexander Keith's IPA. It was the beer that started my beer drinking, basically. Next, Guinness Draft in the Nitro can. Again, looking back, definitely in my review, I overrated this beer a lot. Keep in mind, that was back in the day when I didn't know shit about beer. I know a little bit more shit now. Guinness Draft in the Nitro can was a fucking revelation for me. Of course, I could probably switch this up with like Boddington's or Kilkenny in the Nitro can as well, because they're all fairly similar, actually flavorless, pretty much fucking beers. The only difference is they're so creamy smooth in the Nitro cans. Just so incredibly drinkable. Definitely, what flavors they had were definitely way different from anything that was currently in the SLC. It just opened me up to a whole new world of beer drinking. For the longest time, that's all I would fucking buy, is like Guinness Draft in the Nitro cans, or Boddington's, or Kilkenny. Or I'd move to like bottles of Harp Lager or something like that. Just anything foreign, anything different. It was what set me on the path to start trying new stuff. Next, Black Pearl Cream Ale from the Maritime Brewing Company, now long defunct, was one of basically the first prominent craft brewery in Nova Scotia back in the late 90s. Didn't last very long, but they did sort of set a tone for other craft breweries to get an edge up in the market and get noticed. They had a nice little lineup of beers. The beers themselves probably don't hold up very well if you compare them to the stuff I'm drinking now, but Black Pearl was actually a damn good beer. And it was the first really flavorful craft beer I ever had. And it was one I miss. It was one I wish I could revisit and get again. It was like the first time I drank something that was like, wow, this is like very, very different, even from like the Guinness and the Boddingtons and all that other stuff. It's like there's like real like flavors going on here. There's like a bit of complexity here. There's, definitely different from anything I had before. And that was basically my favorite beer for a longest time. Once it disappeared, I was really, really pissed off, actually. But by that time, newer, better beers were actually starting to show up. New foreign beers, new craft beers. Propeller and Garrison were starting to show up on the NSLC shelves. So I wasn't that pissed off for that long. Okay, so number 10, 9, 8, number 7, Young's Double Chocolate Stout. This is another beer that is definitely gotten lesser in quality. At least that was my last impression of it when we started getting it in cans instead of bottles. But the bottled version of this beer just blew my fucking mind. It was almost like a flavor overload and this is a guy who was just coming off like the Guinnesses and the Boddingtons and that Black Pearl cream ale. Young's Double Chocolate Stout. These were flavors I never expected to taste in a beer, and it was like a flavor fucking overload. Blew my senses, blew my mind. Back then, I think I must have gave it a 5 out of 5. I'm pretty sure something more close to that, at least in my review. I haven't checked. I kind of cringe watching my really old reviews now, but yeah, Young's Double Chocolate Stout. It was like, wow, that you could actually do that with a beer. You could actually like bring like distinct chocolate notes into a beer and like make it work as a beer. Like, wow, like fucking wow, man. And that leads me to number 6, Fuller's London Porter. And this is still one of my favorite beers of all time. World-class beer, in my opinion. This was the one that really got me more and more into dark beers. Porters, stouts, just the whole dark side of the thing. Like, some people say that Fuller's London Porter isn't all that complex, but there's actually a very nice complexity in that beer, and it's just a very well done beer. And it's not necessarily a craft beer, but it's from a brewery that really has a strong family-owned sort of tradition of really making great beer. All the Fuller's products I've ever had have been, at the very least, good, but most of them have been great. And Fuller's London Porter is no exception. And it really opened my eyes and showed me just where British beer was at, where British beer can be, where British beer can build. And it was one of those beers that really got me into more British beers. Like, I like the Guinness, I like the Boddingtons and stuff, but at the same time, I wasn't wild about it. But Fuller's, I started having the Fuller's beers, and London Porter was the first one I had. I was like, yeah, fucking awesome. Total awesome stuff. And so, okay. Number 5, Hoe Garden. Hoe Garden's, or Hoe Garden, I guess. That was actually like the first, I think that was the first white beer I ever had. First wheat beer, first white beer. Still a favorite of mine. Definitely opened me up to a whole different style of beers. Definitely, and it was, it's one of the best possible ones to open you up to that style too. It's just such a well-crafted beer. It has a real deep tradition going for it. And it just made me appreciate a whole different side of beers. Number 4, Duvel. Belgian beer. Strong golden pale ale from Belgium. Fantastic beer. World-class beer. No surprise it gets like 100 out of 100 on a lot of fucking scores. I know some people aren't too keen on it. I absolutely fucking love it. One of my favorite, most refreshing beers. Really shows where a pale ale can go in a total different direction than like an American pale ale. Opened my mind to Belgian beers. I think this was the first Belgian I had. After that, Delirium Tremens showed up, Chimay, and some other ones, Affligem, and all those ones. Those sort of style of beers started showing up. And this was the first one that really got me hooked and addicted to those kind of beers. And honestly, this one's still probably better than most of those other Belgian beers I've had. This is still the sort of the all-time favorite for me. Next, number 3, Propeller London Porter. Now, this one was basically the one that got me hooked on maritime craft beer, like solidly. Like the Maritime Brewing Company was gone for a while. Then all of a sudden, Propeller, Garrison started showing up. Propeller London Porter became a big favorite of mine. It was the one that really got me much more into like the local craft beer scene. Got me interested in like supporting these breweries, seeking out stuff from these breweries. And it's just an excellent beer. It's not quite on par with Fuller's London Porter. It's sort of a different beer than Fuller's. It's on a little sort of a different flavor profile than Fuller's London Porter. But it's a fucking great beer. Really, really good stuff. Sort of like my go-to beer. One of my go-to beers, anyway. It was like the first local craft beer that I, bought on like a regular basis. After Black Pearl, if you can call that a craft beer. I'm sort of a little hazy on that. Like, if the Maritime Brewing Company could really be called a craft brewery, but I suppose it was in its own way. But the first proper, really established craft brewery, I guess, Propeller, that was putting their stuff out there, at least at a fairly major distribution for the province. Fuller's London Porter was it, man. Number 2, Oscar Blues 1050 Imperial Stout. The stout that basically sent the Imperial Stout that set the benchmark for all other Imperial Stouts that I've had after that. Just the amazing amount of flavors and complexity and stuff that came into that beer just fucking, it warped my mind. It like sent it off to another dimension. Not sure if it ever came back. Some people will definitely attest to the fact that it probably hasn't. Great fucking beer. Just world class, like beyond world class. Like, this is the beer that the Norse gods would want to drink, I think. It still blows my mind to this day. I can still, it's the one Imperial Stout where I can still just pick the flavors out right in my mind. I can still remember them vividly, fucking vividly. The only other one that can do that for me is KBS, and KBS I think is just equally on par with 1050, but in a different sort of flavor profile, just on a slightly different scale or whatever. But Oscar Blues is just the one I pick. I could have picked 1050 KBS and stuck it in there, but I went with Oscar Blues anyway. It's the one that really solidified my love of Imperial Stouts to the point where it's like basically my favorite style now. It's just, it's hard to describe how good that beer is. And finally, number 1 game changer sort of beer for me is probably Orval. Now, Orval is very much its own style, really. It's just one goddamn beer. It's the only beer they really make at the brewery. They make a slightly smaller in alcohol version than that beer as well, but that's like their patter beer or whatever. Orval, fucking Trappist beer. It is basically a marriage of sort of like the Trappist golden strong ale and like a fucking sour, like a the Brettanomyces or whatever coming in, fucking souring up the beer. It's just very, very unique. It's one of the more unique beers I've ever had in my life. Made me really, really appreciate different styles. It's very much like a beer that really has a bunch of different things coming into it, a bunch of different elements, and from that beer, it's helped me enjoy other beers much more than I probably would have if I'd just gone into those cold with ever having had Orval as a reference point. And it's just a very, very nice, just a very nice combination of different, just the different possibilities for flavors and stuff in Orval, because you got all these traditional beer flavors, then you got these standard Belgian beer flavors, and then you got all this wild fucking sour weirdness coming in too that maybe you're not quite as familiar with in a beer. And it's just a very nice marriage of those things, and it works all together in my opinion. I know some people really, it's a love it or hate it sort of beer. In my opinion, it just works very, very well together, very beautiful, and that's probably the most striking beer I've ever had, as far as just sending me off in other directions and stuff like that. So yeah, there we go. That's my list for what it's worth, and definitely interested in seeing other people's lists. If you're going to make a list, video response, or if you're just going to write a comment, do it in Chad's video response, his video. I'm going to link it down there, so fucking go to that video response, that video. Leave your comments in Chad's comment section if you're going to be replying with your most influential beers. Keep the conversation in one space so we can all fucking see what everyone thinks. And, instead of having it all spread out all over fucking YouTube. And I don't like tracking down fucking shit all through YouTube. Let's keep it all in one spot. So yeah, very, very cool. Thanks for the question, Chad. It was definitely a interesting video to think about doing. And I know I've run on for almost 17 minutes here, so I'm going to fucking cut off. You guys be good. We will see you later. Bye-bye.